when her grandmother insisted that she come to Viterbo and interview for a position in the master's degree in servant leadership. Grandma is in the audience.
Wave, Grandma.
Grandma has a PhD as a nurse, practicing in Milwaukee, oftentimes with people living on the margins of the community. And she is looking at a place because she loves her granddaughter, where her granddaughter might flourish, and she said, without an option, this is the master's program that I think you should go to. Mariah had a year of college eligibility, a D1 recruit, played at 2 D2 schools, had another year of eligibility because of an injury, and came back and was our first graduate student to play on the women's basketball team. Then at that time, was living at the Place of Grace, our house of hospitality. And she comes in, and here's this young African-American woman. And she's standing there, she's talking to people. And a couple of guys came in, and they started speaking Spanish. And I think they were being smart alecks. I can't understand Spanish. But this young woman turned around, and she spoke Spanish right back to them, and they got shot up. And all of a sudden, I realized that at that moment, this woman had a moral authority, a sense of herself, to be able to serve and lead. She'd work at the Place of Grace, go to school at Viterbo, and then in the evenings went as a CNA and took care of our beloved elders. She is now serving in Milwaukee as a spiritual care specialist at guest house, working with homeless people who do not have a place to live. So I'm asking my friend Regina Siegel to come out and help me, because Mariah, instead of wanting to give a lecture, she wanted to be engaged in a conversation. And so Regina and I are both going to interview you like you're on 60 Minutes. Since being involved in servant leadership, how has your life changed?
I would say it's become more intentional. I live with a purpose every day. I think when I was playing basketball, I lived more aimlessly. Ball really was life. And then I realized that really wasn't purpose, that was a game. So when servant leadership came into my life, when I started playing, even at Viterbo, when my coach is here as well, Bobby, but even then I was immature as a teammate. And it shifted once I started to read and really endorse the curriculum of the servant leadership principles. I realized immediately that I needed to start leading with more intent. I needed to start being a leader in every capacity that I took.
Mariah, who sprinkles those seeds, who nurtures and feeds those seeds of servant leadership, your servant heart now?
Definitely my grandmother started that, but my mother is also just probably the kindest heart I know. And I say kindest heart, I think that people are their hearts, right? When I see people, when I meet people, I want to know their work, but their work is their heart. Like their work is what they're doing in the community, how they're spreading what a heart is, love, right? So I genuinely meet people, and there's new people that I meet every day, and I want to know their work, I want to know their hearts. And so I would say sprinkle would come from the intent of listening. So now every person is a sprinkle that I meet each and every day. Every person who speaks, I meet people intently. And it's funny because my friends always will say, here goes Mariah talking to someone new. And literally, we will go anywhere. I mean, I'll be at the restaurant, there'll be a server, a waitress, anyone. Everyone has value, everyone has heart in the work that they do, and so everyone is genuinely a sprinkle to me.
How did your time at the Place of Grace shape you in looking at the hearts, oftentimes broken hearts of others, and your response as a servant and as a leader?
You know, I never told this story publicly, and I knew it would be a time that I would need to share the story. So I actually thought that I would be queuing in next to the chief of police of across, but unfortunately he's out sick. So Sam took his place. But it's ironic, when I lived here in La Crosse, it was pretty traumatic for me. I went through a really traumatic experience where I was convicted of a DUI, right? And I was convicted of that in August, in May, and I had to start at the Place of Grace in August, right? And I don't even think my culture of Viterbo who's here knows that. No one knew that. But the people that I serve are unfortunately the most vulnerable population who unfortunately has to numb out their pain. And so what do? They use, right? What do? They hurt each other, right? Because a lot of times we don't know how to, one, speak about, articulate our pain, but also try to work together to heal ourselves. So I think starting at the Place of Grace is when I realized that I was no better than anyone that would walk through that door, because I also made my own mistakes. And I also went through my own trauma that I wasn't willing to stare in the face of until God hit me with the best tragedy of my life, where I realized that no one ever, everyone experiences pain, and no one ever in this world is walking around hurting, or is walking around not hurting. Every person has gone through something that has changed their lives forever, and it's whether you want to deal with that or you want to run from it. And so Place of Grace taught me, with each person I walked through the door, that many of those people decided to run. Or live within a society of systematic racism, who never knew what it was to be provided for, and have unfortunately had people run from them, had resources run from them. And so I serve them with that integrity each and every day.
It's beautiful. Mariah, in your current role, you help nurture the souls, the hearts, the spirits of some of those who are hurting the most in our communities and in the Milwaukee area. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the things that might go on during your day? What are some of the daily tasks that you're doing to help serve your community?
Absolutely. One is a privilege to do what I do. It's a privilege to sit in front of anyone. And I work as an individualized counselor, but then I also work in a group setting, rendering group therapy at Guest House as well, or a substance abuse program for serving males in the Milwaukee community. So I'm either running a group or I have about now 18 clients, so I'm ripping and running throughout the Milwaukee area because I come to them. And all of them coming from all walks of life, women, men, some being double my age, some being my age, no one being younger than me. And that was huge at first for me to swallow, like, what do I have to say to these people? But I started to realize that my tragedies, my trauma, spelled out my wisdom. And that's why I started to realize that people listened to me, they wanted my service. And then that's why wait lists and things like that have been created since then within my service, and it's become pretty popular in the Milwaukee area, which I don't talk about much at all, right? But I would say with what I do, faith, my service is, obviously it says the spiritual care specialist, and I didn't really understand, I would say, disseminate how faith changed my life until I started doing what I was doing. And been doing for 2 years. I realized once I was teaching other people the importance of faith, that it made me understand its importance. It was the same thing as when I now have coached basketball at my alma mater in Brown Deer. Same thing. I didn't understand what the challenge of being a coach was until I started to try to teach basketball to young girls who didn't want to listen to a word I had to say. So both went the same way, but teaching faith taught me the importance, and teaching basketball taught me the importance of needing a coach and a role model. So I would say faith and really learning what that was through my clients has really kind of resonated with both and all the people that I serve, just the importance of it in society.
Mariah, you embrace the moral imperative of servant leadership that Robert Pimey talked about. How are the least privileged being served? How has this transformed your life in identifying with the least privileged? Right now in La Crosse, we have about 140 people living in Huska Park. And it really hurts me as people talk about those people. Or what we just saw happening in San Antonio, 51 people dying brought in transit and don't even have a name. How is it that you help people rediscover their humanity in the midst of all this?
I would say interconnectedness is the most important word we all need to endorse as a society. Interconnectedness. When we detach ourselves from thinking that other people mean anything to us at all, that's when we divide as a country, and that's when polarity is created. We literally live in a polar community by choice. This is not by design, well, some might argue, but by choice, we live in a polar society. And the reason is because of many ignoring interconnectedness and its importance. What does it mean and why is it a word, right? Michael talked about words earlier and how words don't mean anything unless it means something to you, right? Like unless you actually embody the word, it's just your actions. But interconnectedness, what that word really is saying is a common love. We all have to come to a sense of loving each other. And I know a lot of people are probably like, that's BS. I have to take care of my family. I have to do this, I have to do that. And that's the problem, I think, with the world right now. If you were to ask me, it's the fact that we don't think that every person deserves the privilege of being loved, first and foremost. And the biggest thing, one of the things was that they weren't eating. Those who passed away, unfortunately, the 50 people who passed, they weren't eating. Who knows whether they were drinking, like just survival needs that we all have need to be met by every person, but we have to all care about that. Each and every one of us has to care about that, the pain, regardless of what we look like, how much money we have, what we've done in the past, right? Transgressions. We can't let that hold us from loving everyone, and that's true interconnectedness.
So Mariah, I know that your health is important to you. Having a good mind, a good heart, a good spirit, and the things that you put in your body and do with your body are important. Can you talk a little bit about that, about how you like to eat and what you like to do? Because I think that is part of your kind of whole person as a servant.
I get what you're getting at. Me and Regina actually met when I graduated Viterbo, and I did leave you. I went back to Milwaukee, went home. My family was happy. But when I met her, I just thought that she was and she still is, just this pivotal figure in the lacrosse community. And so you guys were really privileged to have her. But the story I told her was we were trying to figure out where to go eat. I said, well, okay, thing is, I'm vegan, right? And she, many people get, flabbergasted when I say I'm vegan. They're like, well, what does that mean? What do we need to do? And I'm like, it's gonna be okay. Like, I can, at the end of the day, I'll find a salad, or they all have fruit and they all have water, like I'll be fine, right? But many people get very uncomfortable when I say I'm vegan, which is why I don't say it often, right? But that all happened also when I was in lacrosse, so much transformation in lacrosse. I got diagnosed, and my coach, Bobby, remembers this. I got diagnosed in 2016. So when I graduated from my school in Indianapolis with my bachelor's in psychology, and I also had, at that time, I'd just been recovering from hip surgery. So I tore my labrum in my hip, and I was actually playing on it, which if anyone knows, that's like ridiculous, but I was playing on it. I wanted to play it my last year. I was devastated. And so I had to just succumb to being injured and being out the entire season. And that's why I didn't want to end my career like I did, so I came to Viterbo. They gave me the opportunity. But one of the first things I remember telling Bobby, my coach, was, hey, so I'm doing this pescatarian thing, so like I just need you to be okay with that, okay? Or no, at first I ended up telling her that I wanted to be vegan first. And she said, can we just like meet in the middle at pescatarian? And I was like, you know what? I think I probably should, like, because I always have to jump. So I was like, maybe I should jump just a little bit before I like really reach the top. So that's where it started. Because during that time, the reason why they ended up finding that my hip I tore my labrum, or I had a stress fracture in my hip twice, and I tore my labrum the second time. And the doctor ended up saying it was because I was basically malnourished because I had hypothyroidism, and I didn't know. And so I got a prescription for a medication that they said that I needed to take for the rest of my life. And I just thought that that was like the worst news I've ever heard in my life. Like, I was like, this is it, like, Mom, like, and they almost promised that I would probably need thyroid surgery, so I just thought it was over. And I remember once taking the medication, I remember just saying to myself, okay, I'm gonna figure a way out of this. And then so it was veganism that I researched over and over and over through my undergrad that I realized that was what I was gonna choose, that was a course. Because it was worth a try, and they already gave me, a terminal sentence, right? And so that's what happened over the course of my time in La Crosse. So 2017, August of 2017 is when I became vegan. So I started in 2016, and it took me about a year to become vegan, do that transition. And I weaned myself off my medication, Western medicine. My doctor hated it, but whatever. I got my blood work done over and over and over because she didn't believe it, and my levels have been leveled for about 5 years now. So yep, I've been a vegan since 2017 August, and but as far as taking care of yourself, I took ownership of my health in the moment. I said, is there any other way to live a better life without being dependent on medication? Is there any other way? That was it. Like, many times we just need to ask, is there any other way? And a lot of times we don't want to sacrifice things that we love for that. Like, what could I do different other than take this medication to feel better? And so if I'm connecting the two together, we need to do that in society as well with everything and so on and so forth. But I'm like I said, I became intentional because of servant leadership. So it also included my body. And so being vegan has really, really helped me, but also it's helped my family and my friends. Everyone to this extent around me eats healthier because of me, and it just was a commitment for myself. So we need to all really think about the sacrifices we're making, because it's not just for us, it's for everyone around us as well.
So wise, yet so young. At this point, we're going to call out our other two panelists and give a chance again for a question. Regina, thank you. Why don't you stay here? You asked us one more question. Well, Sam, you come over and join the mic with me here. So, Sam.
Right.
Jeff, have a seat.
Mm-hmm.
All right, a question from the audience for any of our speakers. Jeff from Gunderson, Sam Fulcrum, Mariah, working on the fringes of our communities. Please, Sharon.
How do you sustain yourself in leadership?
Question is to each, how do you sustain yourself in leadership?
I just spoke. Well, I'm going to take off on Mariah. I think part of it's self-discipline. To say that the role of the world is not to take care of me. My job is to take care of the world, and so I have to take, and part of that's me. And so eating a healthy diet, getting your exercise, really boring stuff, right? So you eat well, you exercise well. I think one of the ways to sustain yourself is to understand that it doesn't matter how many degrees you have, how much experience you have. There's so much to learn out there. And I don't know where this phrase comes from. It's kind of cliche-ish, but as a leader, if you're more of a learn-it-all than a know-it-all, you will sustain yourself better, because you can find people to teach you from the front row, from the middle row, from different organizations, people that look different, talk different, have different backgrounds. That sustains you by not talking to the same people about the same stuff, but taking care of yourself and broadening your horizons.
And echoing on a little bit, building on that, and echoing a little bit of what Michael was talking about this morning, being willing to be wrong or being willing to make mistakes, right? And accepting that and understanding that you don't have all of the information and you're open to learning, to new experiences every day, I think is critical for that.
Yeah, I heard somebody say the other day, you don't get better unless you make mistakes. And I don't think that's true. I think you get better by making mistakes and then learning from them. There's a lot of people who make mistakes. Just keep making mistakes.
Yeah, keep making the same mistakes. Keep making the same ones. Yeah, same thing, yeah.
I would say balance too. You have to find the balance of taking care of yourself. It has to be the same amount. Like, I can't put in so much to my client and then go home and do nothing for me. It has to be equal. Making sure you're taking care of yourself. Just like you want your clients to take care of themselves.
I have a question. So we're talking about disruptions in this session, and there are many disruptions in our world right now and in our country right now. What would be your thoughts on a step that we can take here, a tangible step to help heal our community or heal our world?
Take empathy seriously. As again was discussed this morning, listen to people. And when I talk with young people about critical thinking, when we think about critical thinking, we tend to think of it as what I would call the vertical, right? The deep thinking. But critical thinking also is horizontal. It means opening yourself up to new ideas and new experiences and being willing to maybe be wrong or to learn from somebody else, to acknowledge. We're missing so much of that in our public discourse today, and this is why we can't be civil, because everybody goes into pretty much every political conversation convinced they have all the information and they're correct. And odds are you're not, but you can learn from someone, you can listen from someone, and by doing that, we can actually build some bridges in our society if we take that seriously.
I think there's very few problems that we have that are single sector problems. Healthcare, after being pretty much comatose for 50 years or 100, is finally wake up saying, gee, some patients are sick because of things outside the walls of the hospital or the clinic. What an amazing thing. Who knew that being starved or uneducated or not having immunizations, not having adequate transportation, food, or opportunities could make you ill? What an amazing thought. Maybe we should do something about it. So I think almost none of the solutions are single sector. And that's why we go back to the original discussion today about purpose. What do we want for our communities? And then who's going to contribute to that? Whose voices, broad and deep voices? Whose abilities, broad and deep abilities from different parts? That's how you solve problems long term, not for the next monthly financial report, but long term for the good of your group, your organization, or the community. So it's breadth and depth beyond your walls, and that'll make you a stronger company, a stronger educational organization, or whatever you're working on.
I always say change doesn't come without disruption, right? Change doesn't come without chaos. So I would say it needs to be us embracing disruption. More came after, say, the racial uproar. More came after COVID. We started caring about the lives of others more. Embracing the change that came after disruption and not just seeing it as it was this horrible, horrifying thing. How do we change as people after it? Embracing that and then pushing that and not just allowing that to be one thing that happened and then a year later go back to where we were. No, endorse the change because it happened for a reason.
Please, lady, right now.
This question is for Ms. Weddle. How do you maintain that balance, maintain the balance in your life after giving so much away? How do you,
Question is, how do you maintain balance after giving so much away?
That's a hard question. And I can promise you, I'm not great at it. Or I wasn't great at it. But it wasn't until I started being accountable for my own mental health, right? So you should always take in the things that you expect others to take from you, right? So if I'm a counselor, I needed therapy myself then. You know, if whatever it was that I was giving away, I also needed to take back. So if I'm speaking, then I also need to be reading content, you know? So I would say, how do I lift up? How do I lift myself up? I always am evaluating myself. I'm being honest with myself. I'm journaling. I would tell everyone to get a journal. I'm journaling. I'm praying. I'm figuring out what is it that I need in my life right now. I'm always asking myself, what do I need? And then I go about finding those things for myself. So always evaluating self.
Please, last question.
I have a question for Sam about publishing and about self-publishing. Has it been a disruptor for your business? Has it given you opportunities or challenges as a leader?
The question is, publishing and self-publishing, how has that contributed to disruption and opportunities?
So when I first got into the business, self-publishing was there, but it was incredibly expensive. People had to pay thousands of dollars and would end up with a garage full of books, basically, which no one wanted to. And Amazon, of all players, and Barnes & Noble to an extent, actually really radically changed all of that. So that now the self-publishing availability is for anybody. You can pay very little. You still should pay to get your book edited if you're going to self-publish a good edited book. And it also probably pays to get somebody to help with layout. But the barrier to entry is much lower. I don't see that for us as a disruption, simply because it kind of goes back to the thing I said earlier about how so many people have a book that they want to get out there, but not everybody has a book that fits for a traditional publishing house. And so to me, the point that there are more avenues for voices to get out there is actually wonderful. I think that is tremendous, because the more voices that we have out there, the more people can actually connect with those voices. Many of the self-published books, I think the average self-published book sells about 40 copies a year. So they're not real big sellers, but for the person who writes them, and for those 40 people who buy them, they are very, very important books. So that doesn't work in the model of traditional publishing, but great that there is a path for that exists today. I actually think it's quite wonderful. Now I think bigger publishers and other publishers see it maybe as a disruption because it clutters the marketplace, or maybe as an opportunity because sometimes you can pluck some of these particularly fan fiction novels and build that into a great new brand, as has happened with some books over the years. But no, I think the more voices we have, the more democratic process we have for publishing, we're a better country for that. So I'm happy to see that there are platforms for that existing today.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank Regina Siegel, Vice President of Trust Point, for coming up and leading our discussion. The next time you pick up a book, please think of Sam. The next time your family needs health care, please think of Jeff. The next time you see one of our brothers and sisters with hard traveling, please think of Mariah. Thank you all so very much. Just before lunch, Kathy Smalley is going to lead us in a short engagement exercise. Kathy?
Morning, everybody. Morning. How great has this morning been? Well, I'm an introvert, so I always have to take time to process. I'm sure many of you are as well. So, before we break to lunch, I'm going to ask us to take a few moments. I'll start out with a story for you, and then we'll have a chance to share with each other before we break for lunch. So let me set the stage for this story. There's a woman that walks every single morning. God bless her. I don't have that kind of discipline. But she goes out right around dawn every morning, walks. So this was a few months, well, more than a few months ago, right at the beginning of fall. So picture in your mind, you know, the days are getting shorter, the leaves are falling off the trees, right? And she's doing her walk. Well, the weather's so nice, she's actually walked a little further than she usually does. She's trudging up a hill. The first lights of the day are coming through, and she sees a silver maple tree that she's seen many, many times before. But that day, that light hits that maple tree, and for a moment, it looks like, is it the light coming through the tree? Or is it angels dancing on their wings in that tree? And she stops in awe, right? And she's like, this is really neat. There's a tree full of angels. And she takes it in. Picture it. Now, if she was a kid, what would she do? She'd be running home and saying, Mom, I saw a tree full of angels. And every one of her friends, she'd be running around telling them that. But she's an adult, so what does she do? She's like us. She's not going to tell one person that she saw a tree full of angels this morning on her walk, is she? Keep that in mind as we continue along here. So, Robert Greenleaf, as you all know, is the father of servant leadership. And in his seminal work, The Servant as Leader, he says the following: awareness is not a giver of solace. It's just the opposite. It's a disturber and an awakener. Able leaders are usually sharply aware and reasonably disturbed. They are not seekers after solace. They have their own inner serenity. Inner serenity is not something that leaders are born with. It's something that they have to work at. Inner serenity takes time, it takes silence, it takes contemplation. And I am more than ever convinced that because of the disruptions in the last few years, we as leaders have to spend more time in silence and contemplation so that we can continue to develop that inner serenity. Now, as a leader, if all you do is contemplate and think, but don't go anywhere with that, you're not going to get very far either. You need a trusted mentor, spiritual advisor, whatever you would like to call them, even just a good friend that you can bounce those ideas off of. I encourage you to do that as well. So the story that I took is in a book. It's actually called A Tree Full of Angels. And it's written by a Benedictine sister, Macrina Wiederkirk. I'm going to butcher her name even though I've said it to myself many, many times. But in this book, she also has a poem. Is there a lost child in you? What pains me most these days is my inability to reach back into my years and touch the child that I was. And yet, loving, living, stirring deep within my soul, that child lives on. There are days when my adult ways turn tasteless in my mouth, and the child of long ago starts pressing on my soul. On days like that, I long to touch that child again, and let her take me by the hand and lead me down a path that has a heart, and show me all the things that I've stopped seeing because I've grown too tall. I invite you to spend a minute or two and think about things that you no longer see because you've grown too tall. And now I invite you to share what you've thought about with someone near to you. Take a few moments, share what you've thought about.